Hi, everyone. Welcome to Appalachian Traditions, a virtual discussion of traditional Appalachian craft, music, and dance. I'm Darcy Holdorf. I'm the program director here at the John C. Campbell Folk School, and I'm thrilled to bring you Anne Freels, joining us from her studio, and she'll be talking to us about shuckery, demonstrating how to make corn husk dolls, and talking about this traditional Appalachian art form that has Native American roots. So we'll get to hear some of her story and actually see her make some things and show us how to work with corn husks. So Anne has learned this traditional style, but has also expanded upon it to develop her very own unique, I would call it more elaborate and more contemporary work. So we'll get to see some of her work today. Anne has been a corn shuck doll maker since 1975 and a full-time craft artist since 1998. Her whimsical, one-of-a-kind dolls have been featured on HGTV as well as in Country Woman and Country Handcraft magazines. And her book, Making Colorful Corn Shuck Dolls, was published in 2011. And that's really an excellent book. And you can get that at our craft shop. We'll talk about that book later. She teaches workshops and demonstrates and sells her dolls at venues throughout the Southeast, working from her studio near downtown Knoxville, Tennessee, where she's part of a cooperative gallery, which I think that's where you're joining us from now. And in addition to her corn shuck artistry, Anne also creates her own line of natural herbal skincare products, Annie Egypt Herbals. She's a member of the Southern Highland Craft Guild and Tennessee Craft. And you've also taught here at the Folk School. So we're thrilled to have you. Everyone who's joining us, if you have questions or would like to say hello, go ahead and say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're joining from. You can also add questions to the Q&A, and we will be taking questions at the end. So feel free to type those in. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure getting to know Darcy with this webinar. Thank you all for joining me. I can't see you, which is good. So, but you can see me. This is my studio. I've been here about 5 years. We each have little individual studios. This used to be an office building. And well, since COVID, we haven't had our little gallery open, but some of us come in and work, and we're very mindful of wearing masks and all while we're in the hallways and stuff. But anyway, I love having a studio away from home, because for 40 years I worked in a little room in whatever house I was in. So it's wonderful to actually come to work now. So this is where I make the dolls. I dye all the shucks at home in my kitchen. So some of the work happens at home and I just bring them here, but all of the actual corn shuck doll making happens here. Darcy mentioned that I have taught at the folk school. I love the folk school. I can't wait until I get to teach there again when we're all able to join in person again. So I'm looking forward to that. I wanted to start out by just giving you a little background of how I got started in this and how my life and working with corn shuck dolls has evolved. It's such a big part of my life now. I've been doing it over half of my life. So when I was in high school, my senior year, there was a little alternative education school right on campus at the Oak Ridge High School. I grew up in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and there was this little alternative school. And I applied to do my senior year there. And surprisingly, they accepted me, and it was a small grouping. There was about 30 students. We chose our own curriculum, and there was like 3 instructors, and student teachers would come in. So we had a lot of freedom to learn the way that was best for us individually to learn. So we decided to have an Appalachian studies class, since we were right in the heart of Appalachia. And we, as part of the requirements for the class, we were required to learn several traditional crafts. We made a broom, we churned butter. Finding unpasteurized milk wasn't that easy to find, but we were able to do that. And we cut down a white oak tree, made splits, and as a group, we bottomed a chair, we made a basket, and then a local corn shuck doll maker came in and we all made a corn shuck doll. And it was that moment that I fell in love with corn shuck dolls. As soon as I finished my first little doll, I said, you know, can I make another one? And I actually brought that, I actually have that doll with me. This is the very first corn shuck doll that I made back in the fall of 1975. I think we used plastic grapes for inside the head, but you can see she's very primitive. We used corn silk for the hair, and the little broom is just a little stick with the corn shuck at the bottom. So I've kept this all this time because it's interesting to see the evolution of how my dolls have changed over these 45 years. For instance, you know, they've gone from this to, well, let's see. This is one I've made for, she's a shopper at the farmer's market. It's got a little hand knit hat, little homemade bag. And I embellish some of them with these little store-bought miniatures too. So anyway, that's how I got started. So I just kept making the dolls. I graduated from high school a little bit early, and I wasn't working, so I stayed. I was living with my parents, of course, so I would make dolls. And there was a little cooperative, a craft cooperative just north of where I lived, and I took my little dolls up there in a cardboard box, and they accepted me into the co-op, and I started selling the dolls there. About a year later, so in 1977, this craft co-op had a gift of a scholarship from the Foothills Craft Guild to go for Aramont School of Arts and Crafts in Gatlinburg. And they gave me a scholarship for a week-long corn shuckery class. So right away, I had this wonderful opportunity to learn from Lila Marshall and her family, who were Southern Highland Guild craftspeople, heritage crafters. And that class, that workshop was wonderful. It catapulted me into a whole new level. I learned how to dye the shucks. I learned some techniques of shredding the shucks. I was able to be in the class with other corn shuck doll makers from around the country. And, you know, I was just 18, but I was thrilled to be in at Aramont. So that's the way I started. But I couldn't make a living making corn shuck dolls when in the late 70s. So I got a job at Oak Ridge. I worked my way through school. I went to little festivals and craft shows on the side. I would take vacation from work to do shows. And by the late 90s, I had practiced enough and became brave enough to apply to Tennessee Craft and the Southern Highland Craft Guild. So in '89, I got into those two guilds and started working with professional craftspeople. So I ended up working about 7 more years in 1997, I decided to quit my full-time job to make corn shuck dolls full-time. And I've been doing that ever since. The best decision I ever made. I just love it. And I wanted to live the life of a craft artist. It's not necessarily a vow of poverty, but it came close a few times. But with my wholesale orders to shops and galleries, which a lot have come to me through the Southern Highland Guild. And now I have an Etsy shop, and I get commissions for gifts and wedding presents and housewarmings and a variety of special commissions. So I'm able to stay in my studio. So I want to, while we're talking, and I'll be glad to answer questions too. If you have something, if you have a question about what I'm doing in particular, I can stop and answer that. But what I plan to do here is talk a little bit more about the history of the dolls and some more information about them and my materials, but I'll be making one as we speak. And I'll try to go slow, but this is not a class, but I will show you every step that I go through to make the doll. So what I have here is a dishpan, an old dishpan with warm water. And I add a little bit of maybe 3 tablespoons of vegetable glycerin. So this softens the shucks, and it also, it's an emollient, so it helps your hands too. But you have to work with the shucks while they're damp and to make them pliable. So hence the water and the glycerin. So I'm going to take some dried corn shucks. Now for years and years and years, I have been getting my corn shucks in bulk, 40 pounds at a time. I go through 150 to 200 pounds of corn shucks a year. So I've been using the same supplier for over 25 years. And Carlos and I know each other well from ordering corn shucks from him. So the corn shucks are actually grown in Mexico for tamales, to use with tamales and craft work. So I would buy them from the importer, who then repackages them to sell in the grocery stores. And you can find the corn shucks in the grocery stores in the produce section for tamales, but they seem to be a little more expensive in the grocery stores than I was getting wholesale. So I have dampened my corn shucks, squeezing out the excess water. I'm going to put my pan back over here out of the way. I'm going to spread these out a little bit. So this is what they look like when you find them in the grocery store, and there's different brands. Anyway, I called Carlos to order some more shucks a few weeks ago, and he said that he no longer carries them because they've gone up so much. And I thought, well, how can corn husks go up so much? They're just corn husks, right? And he gave me the name of his supplier, who will not ship less than 700 pounds. And they don't sell to individuals. They only sell to, produce, grocery stores and that kind of thing. So I was in this quandary. How am I going to get my shucks? Because I didn't want to buy them at the grocery store. They're too expensive. Well, I found these at Save-A-Lot. Actually, for the same price that I was paying my supplier, and the store is less than a mile from my house. So it's funny how COVID has given us these little gifts. So anyway, I'm now just buying them.
Quick
Yes,
question, when you're looking, when you're buying them, is there some way that you can tell if they are good or if they're damaged? What do you look for?
well, they're all going to be, see, this one has a couple of wormholes in it. This one has a wormhole in it. Some of them are going to have ripples, which can be really nice, a nice effect for a dress. So every package is going to have, hopefully, a good mix of nice, big, clean shucks, and maybe there's some other ones that aren't necessarily really pretty. But that's okay. We use the not so pretty ones or the misshapen ones or the ones that are too thin. See this one, that one I would roll up to use as the head because there's going to be so much shucks that you can't see. So see this Father Christmas, it's all shuck underneath. The head is shuck. And I'm only using the nicer dyed shucks on the outside, which I'll talk about. So you're going to get a mix. So it's good to have a couple of pounds of shucks to go through and choose which ones you want. When I get my shucks, when I'm dyeing them, I'll go through each package and I'll pull out the really nice big ones to dye. The rest go in a bag and I'll use those for the head and the underskirts. So there's no waste, but I do like to just use the nicer ones to dye because like I showed you with the Father Christmas, and I'll show you with the quilter. There's only the dyed shucks. I only use the dyed shucks on the outside. So
There are a couple more questions about the shucks. Can you use them from your garden, and are they from a particular type of corn?
a particular type of corn, I'm not sure, but I was told that these corn shucks are grown for the shucks. So the ears are particularly large. And I'm sorry that I don't have a name of a corn plant, the actual kind of corn. But yes, you can use corn shucks out of the garden. They're if you're going to shuck them, though, you need to be careful and pull them off so they stay whole. Because my experience is when you're shucking the green corn, they'll split, and you're going to have a lot of, really narrow pieces. And it's so much easier to make a doll with big pieces. But yes, you can try your hand at drying your own shucks. When I first started out, I gathered corn husks from my grandmother's neighbor's corn crib. And they were short and misshapen, and a lot of them had wormholes in them, or they would get mildewed. So, but that also lends a certain aspect to a doll if you want it to look primitive and old-fashioned. There's something sweet about that. I've just moved beyond that I'm way beyond that now. Although I really do like to go back and make just a little traditional doll sometimes. It's all natural and no dyed shucks, just to keep me humble. So if you have any more questions about the shucks, please ask. But while I'm talking here, I'm going to choose a dyed color, a couple of dyed shucks that I want to use for this doll, and I'll go ahead and dampen those. I'm thinking I've got this nice teal. some purple. I'm just going to put this in here. And by the way, I use RIT dye. I used to buy the little packages, but I quickly outgrew the little packages, and I buy them. I used to buy them in 5-pound containers, but now I usually get them in 1-pound containers. And they're not in containers anymore. Actually, the dye is sold in little pouches. But I keep a big supply of dyes, and I mix my own colors a lot as well. I have a little book at home, a little notebook where I'll put if I decide that I need a green, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and do a blue first, and then I'll add my yellows, my golden yellows, or whatever shade I'm going to make the green from. But I'll just keep using the same dye pot. So sometimes my colors, I can't duplicate them, but I do keep a notebook of, I'll take a little swatch of corn husks and tape it in, and then put down the colors that I use, but I don't use measurements. I just go by sight. And that can be a fun part of it, is to create your own colors. So that's a hallmark, and one of the signature things about my dolls is colorful. So I named, the title of my book is Making Colorful Corn Shuck Dolls. It's an important part of my particular dolls. Okay, so I've got my dyed shucks dampened and my natural shucks dampened. I'm going to adjust my screen so you can see my hands.
Since you're talking about dyes, do you need something to make the dyed color hold?
I used to not, but now that RIT has changed their formulas, they say you have to use salt. You have to add your own sodium. They used to come mixed, pre-mixed, and so I'm having a little trouble with some of the colors now. Holding red seems to be the one that likes to bleed the most. But so it takes a lot of rinsing. But I'm experimenting with using more salt to it. Maybe I didn't have enough. And there are products that you can use, that you can buy from actually the RIT company for setting the dye. So whatever dye you use, and you could use more expensive dyes, the corn husk is a cellulose. So it would take the dye the same as cotton, or cotton, mostly cotton. Wool might be a little bit different, but I have been using the dye as any natural fiber. But wool being an animal product, I don't think there's any difference, but it might take the dye a little bit differently. What I have just done, I'm going to show you. I just made a ball, but I will do that again. I've taken a corn husk I'm going to just split that. Oh, by the way, corn husks, extremely, extremely strong this way. Very easy to split along the ridges. One side is smooth, one side has ridges. You can see the grain, and they just split very easily that way. So I'm going to take a piece about 3 inches wide. I'm going to fold it in thirds and just roll it up. So the width of this piece is going to be the size of the head. So there's a little ball. Now that's not big enough for what I want, so I'm going to take another little strip and roll it up again. Now this next part, I'm going to cover this with a corn shuck, and this particular step can be a little confusing. But if you ever take a class from me, I'll be very, very slow and patient and show you how to do this step by step, but we have limited time right now. So I'm going to put this little ball in on the smooth side of the corn husk because I want the smooth side out. And I'm just going to take my hand and turn it 180 degrees and fold that piece down, smooth it out, twist it, and I've created a head. I use the Coats and Clark button and craft thread. I'm just going to wrap it around a few times, pull it tightly, snip it, and tie a square knot. You want all the knots to be very, very tight. And we go over that in class over and over and over again. Because if you don't, since we're working with the shucks while they're damp, you know, as they dry, they're going to lose moisture, so they're going to shrink. So if you don't have a very tight knot and a tight pull, they could just fall apart. Okay, so there's the head. And it's a little misshapen, but that's okay. Now for the arms, I used to use pipe cleaners, but these are called chenille stems and they're quite a bit longer, so that you have a choice of how big a doll you want to make. So proportion is very important to me. So I eyeball it. And I generally do this in the class when I'm going to bend down here. And in the class, you know, I hold my arms out and and let everyone see the proportion of how far the arms come out from the head. You know, and when you drop your arms, your fingers are usually hit mid-thigh, right? So I like them to be proportional. I've got to say something though. So I'm going to just eyeball it. So that looks about right to me. I'm just going to trim that and toss it. Whoops. One of the anecdotes here. When you saw the first doll I made, that really tiny one. What I'm doing here is taking a strip about 2 inches. I'm going to lay the corn. I'm going to come over here so you can see this. I'm going to lay the chenille stem narrow point towards the middle, wider end of the corn husk to the end. Just lay it on there and roll it up. And I left that corn husk at the top so that I can bend it over, form a loop. And this loop will be the hand. I'm just going to take my thread, wrap it around. So I'm tying it. Well, that came loose. I'm going to tie it at the wrist. And you do this on the other end of the chenille stem as well. Just take another piece of corn husk.
So, Anne, someone asked how you determine the size of the head. Is that based on the size of the other corn husks you already have, or?
Exactly. If all of your shucks are very short, you want to make your head a little bit smaller because the height, the size of your doll, all I've done is repeated what I did on one end to the other end. The size of your doll is going to be determined by the length of your corn husk. And I use husk and shuck interchangeably. I grew up with corn shuck, but husk kind of rolls off the tongue a little easier, so I go back and forth. So now I've got 2 loops, which are the hands. Now I'm going to make the sleeves. And while I'm finding a corn husk to make the sleeve out of, I'll answer some more of those questions. See the length of this? This is a nice, long corn husk, as opposed to this one. And, you know, they could have come from the same bag of corn husk. So this is going to allow me to make a tall doll because it's going to be the skirt. This will only allow for a short doll. So you want to make the head in proportion to, you know, whatever size corn husk you have. And this is just practice. Proportion is one of the things that it took me many, many years to get down to where I can make the same size doll now automatically. But what I was going to say earlier is this very first doll I made, the little tiny one, that was in the mid-70s. So in the 1980s, I went through a big head, short arm phase. And then that evolved into some dolls in the 90s were a little head and way long arm phase, until I finally got it to where they're all about the same now. I think I'll take a little minute and show you what I'm talking about. This is my book, Making Colorful Corn Shuck Dolls. And in between all the instruction, there's color photographs, and there's 2 different dolls that I make here. It's the same doll, but 2 different methods of making the doll. And in the middle, there is this page that shows the first doll I made, which I showed you. And then, so that was 1975. And then it goes through, here's my big head, short arm phase. And then in the 90s, I kind of went skinny, longer arms. Sorry if that's not showing you. But anyway, there is this timeline of dolls in the book that show the different, how they've evolved. The thing is, I just kept making them. You know, I just kept up with it, and they're all pretty much uniform now. So now I've got the head. This is all step by step by step. The head, the arms with the hands. So I'm going to make the sleeves. I think I'm going to do purple sleeves. So I want 2 corn husks about 3 inches wide. And I'm going to cut these sleeves. This is a time-saving measure. I'm going to cut the, I'm cutting these to the size that I want, trimming them. So I trimmed off the pointy end, trimmed off the wide end. These are still going to be a little bit long, but I will adjust that when I put them on here, on the arms. So I want the smooth side to be out, but you can use either side. If you want a more rustic looking doll, you can use the ridged side out, which is really very nice. But I tend to use the smooth side, which has a little bit of a sheen to it. So I want the smooth side out, so I'm going to place my arm with the loop just poking out the end. I'm leaving about a 1/2 inch. Just loosely rolling this up. I want just a little bit of the hand to show, so I'm pushing it. So there's a sleeve. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other end. Holding it in the middle as I do this. It's another time-saving step. You could tie each one onto the arm, but I just do it all at once. So now I've got the sleeves. I'm going to take the head. The arms go behind the head. I'm going to leave a little bit of neck there. I'm going to hold it with these two fingers, and with my thread, leave a little trail to hold on. I'm using these two fingers to hold the thread so that I have some tension, and do a figure 8. I'm going over one shoulder and under the other arm a couple of times, pulling it tight, trimming it, and another tight knot. Did I answer the question about the length of the shuck?
I think so. Yeah. Thank you. Feel free to post any questions if you like.
Okay. So there we have the head and the arms. Yay. Next thing I'm going to do is build up the bodice. So I'll have something to tie the skirt onto. And you might have noticed I was tearing strips earlier, and the longer the strips, the better. Because what I'm going to do is follow my X pattern, my figure 8. I'm going to go over one shoulder, under the other arm. And if they're nice and long, I can do this twice. I'm going to pull it tight and hold it. And then this is a step you just keep, and I'm going to do the opposite side now. And this you just continue to do until you feel like the bodice is big enough, proportional enough. This is where you can determine how big the doll is going to be in the middle. I did a Frida Kahlo and a Diego Rivera. If you're familiar with the Mexican painters, they were married to each other. Diego was a very big guy, and Frida was petite, but I did the Diego, and it's like, how can I get his belly to be that big around? So I won't tell you all my secrets, but let's say I used a lot of cotton. Okay, I'm going to do one more. So each strip you have to really hold tight. So there's the bodice. So I'm going to take another. You also need 3 hands. So I'm going to hold this with one hand and strip this with the other. Now I'm going to just fold over 2 pieces. One over one shoulder, one over the other. I'm going to get that about equal. And then this is where you determine where you want the waist. So I'm going to hold on to that and take my thread, tie it, pull it tightly. Tie a knot. And there's the waist. So this gives you something substantial to tie the skirt onto. Ta-da! Pretty simple when you break it down into these steps. Now, you can leave these sleeves, open and wide like that, but once the doll dries, they have a tendency to split. So what I do a lot of times is take a strip and tie it around the wrist. And here you can, and the corn shuck is, you know, the tensile strength is very strong. So some of them will split, but this is a nice, good, strong one. So I'm just tying, you can tie a bow or a square knot. It gives it a little decoration at the sleeve, but it also holds the sleeve together and it won't split later. So I'm going to do it to the other side.
And how long do the shucks stay wet and pliable?
Depends on the humidity of the room and where you're working, but a few hours. You know, I've done demos outside though, where it was, you know, where it was dry and maybe there was a breeze and they would dry out pretty quickly, but you just dampen them again. But these shucks, if I just left this pile here, they would still be a little bit damp in the morning. The outer ones would be dry, but I might still be able to find one. But I will just put these back in the water. We'll get some fresh water and re-dampen them. So I can leave, you know, I can leave my mess. I don't have to clean up like I used to when I had a little room in my house or worked at the dining room table. So here we go. She's ready for her skirt, or he. Now, I'm going to apply the skirt with what I call a direct application. The other option is an inverted skirt where you fold her arms up like this, where you put the skirt on with the doll upside down, this, and you layer your pieces around, tie it at the waist, then turn it over and flip it down. But we're not going to do that right now. I'm going to do the direct application. So I'm just going to put the shucks right side up. I'm going to start with shorter shucks, the short ones. I'm just going to layer it around the waist, holding on to where the waist is. And you want to make sure that you have plenty of the shuck above the waistline, because you want to be able to grab that when you tie it. And I'm starting with the shorter shucks because, and you know, this took me years to figure out, but because you want the outer skirts to be longer than the inner ones so that it's just much easier to trim. And the advantage of that is there's less likelihood of it wobbling, of you not getting a nice clean cut. If all the shucks are the same length, it's a lot for scissors to cut through. Plus, it's hard to get them even. And you want the doll to stand up straight. So that might be more information than you need at this point, but that's why I do it this way. So I go longer as I go around. So there's one in the back. So I just keep layering these until again, until you think that it's big enough, until you've got enough skirt. You can make it as poofy as you want. You can make a nice big fat doll. You can make a slim doll. But you want enough shucks to where the bottom is going to be bigger than the top, because it won't stand up by itself if you don't. And the corn shucks actually lend themselves very well to this because they are, you know, thinner at one end and flared at the other end. So it's actually perfect for this shape. I'm just going to keep layering. See, I'm using the natural shucks and they don't have to be perfect. Some of these are they're stained or they have the holes in them. But you're not going to be able to see those because they're underskirts. So this is where you use up all the shucks that aren't perfect. And this one has the little ridges on it, which can be nice on the outside too, but this is going to be hidden. Oh, it's almost a shame to use this beautiful shuck on the underskirt. I think I'll save that one. That one deserves to be on the outside of another doll. Okay. And I don't know if anyone was counting. I was not. The important thing is to hold on to where the waist is while you're layering. I think that feels about right. So I dampened these teal colored shucks, and I'm going to now apply these. Now, did the head to where the smooth side of the shuck is on the face. So that's the front of the doll. So I'm going to start in the back of the doll with this last piece. So that the front skirt is overlapping the back piece. So that it looks better from the front. You have the overlap back here. Okay, so still holding on to where the waist is. Now I've been using the Coats button and craft thread up till now, but now I've got to bring out the strong big guns here. You can use waxed linen, waxed cotton. I started out using dental floss, but that's not strong enough anymore because you have to tie this so tightly that all of the regular strong thread that you'd think they're just not strong enough to hold it. So this is some waxed linen, super duper strong, that a broom maker friend gave me. So I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail, and then where I tied the waist, I'm going to pull it as tightly as I can. I'm going to wrap it and pull it. Now I've wrapped it twice. So I don't want a lot of bulk there. You want to get it tight, but not have a whole bunch of twine there to make it bulky. Now what I'm looking for now is my towel, because what I'm going to do is wrap my hand in the towel. So that this twine doesn't cut through my skin. Actually, you really need to pull this tight. So I'm still holding the tail end between these two fingers, but since this is waxed, it actually holds its place very well. It's not going to slide on you. So I'm just wrapping up my finger so that when I pull this, when I pull it tightly, it doesn't cut into my finger. Another trick I learned the hard way. So that's why you use the wax stuff, not just because of its strength, but it tends to hold its place. So I've tied the knot.
You're breaking the doll when you're doing that?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
Is there any risk of breaking the doll, the husks in the middle there when you do that?
Nope. I mean, I guess there could be if you pulled it so tight, but again, it's just a matter of practice and feeling your way around. So now we've got all this extra up here. I'm just going to take my scissors and trim that off close to where the thread is. But it's going to be covered up with an apron, so we won't see this. But we do need to trim it. It's okay if it's a little bit raggedy, but I'll trim it a little neater. Okay, let me get this towel out of the way. Okay, she's almost done. So now, I'm sorry, I was going on without you. I'm going to trim the bottom. Actually, she's standing up pretty good without being trimmed, but always have to trim the bottom. So you need good, strong scissors. I've got some great big ones here. And I'm going to try and cut as straight a line as I can. And then this is the moment of truth. She stands up without wobbling. So you can see the shorter husks are in the middle. The longer ones are around the perimeter, which gives her a nice base to stand on. So except for the apron, this is about done. I was hoping I could get to the finish work on one of these, but all that information, if you need more instruction, you can take one of my classes whenever we reconvene, or get the book, or order a kit. But what I'm going to do now is take 2 strips. Since we have the front and the back to cover up, I'm going to put a double apron on her, one in the front and one in the back.
And you've got a couple questions about faces. Clara, who's 9 years old, she asks if you put faces on your dolls, and if you don't, why not?
I never have, because this is the way I learned. I learned from someone who didn't, she didn't put faces on hers, or maybe, well, the reason I don't is I'm not that good with a pen, and the face would go on, I don't know, I guess you could do the face first, but while the shuck is damp, it might be hard to do the face at this stage. But if you're not really good with drawing a face, if you mess it up at this point, you're kind of, you know. So anyway, that's one reason. I've just never done really little drawings on, faces. But the main reason is the legend that I learned. The corn is one of the 3 sisters of the indigenous Native Americans. The 3 sisters are corn, squash, and beans. And they're sacred, and they sustained, that's what sustained the indigenous, the Native Americans. And I'm sorry I didn't talk about this earlier, but yes, the Native Americans are the ones that started the corn shuck dolls to keep their young ones busy while they were harvesting the corn. Europeans didn't have corn. It was the Native Americans, North America and South America. Corn is native to these continents. So There, I've taken 4 strips. I'll get back to what I was saying in a minute. I'm doubling them up. So I'm putting 2 in the front and 2 in the back. I'm going to put one on the front over her face and one over the back of her head. I'm going to hold it at the neck. And again, take my thread, tie it tightly, tie a knot. So the legend is that the corn spirit, the corn husk doll, was so enamored with her own beauty. She kept staring at herself in a pool of water, you know, a pond, that the great spirit said, nope, you are, you're too vain. And the story goes that that's why corn husk dolls don't have faces. But I have seen many, and I have a collection of other people's work too, just some older ones and newer ones, but the faces are darling. I mean, some of them are just so expressive. But without a face, you can just imagine an expression. And with something like, so this is, some people like to call this a female clause, but this is a winter solstice. And I just don't think she needs a face. And the Father Christmas has so much beard and a mustache up in there, it'd be hard to put a face on him too. But it's totally up to the maker. So you can put faces on if you want. But remember, whatever face you put on there is going to, I'm just tearing a strip to make a sash for this apron. Whatever face you put on is going to be there forever.
And Eileen asks, when you teach here at the folk school or elsewhere, do you teach this in a weekend or a week-long class?
Week-long. We make, what I like to do is start out dyeing the corn husk. So everybody gets a chance to dye. We make several colors that we're going to use for the class. We start at the beginning. We separate all the shucks and dye the shucks. And then we'll make a little bookmark just so everybody gets familiar with the feel of the corn husk and the smooth side, the rough side, how easily it tears, how strong they are, that kind of thing. We start out with a simple little bookmark. And then we go into making dolls. And then by the 3rd day, everybody's so excited about making, oh, I want to do one like this, or I want to do one like this. You're pretty much on your own, and I'm there to help you. And I like to make at least 2 seasonal dolls. I always like to make a witch, a kitchen witch, or just a standing witch, or Halloween witch, so that you have something for that holiday. And we always make a Father Christmas as well, so that you have something for that holiday. But it's really an exploration of whatever you want to do next. Once you learn the basic doll and get a few dolls under your belt, then it's just kind of like a free-for-all and fun. And we go out and gather moss and seed pods and little hemlock cones and all kinds of natural materials to embellish them with as well. And speaking of embellishment, you see all these drawers I have here. I have drawers full of wool. I mostly use wool for the hair. But this is some flax. It's the only blonde that I have. This is natural curly wool. I use that for my father Christmases and any white-haired doll that I want to make. I have red, blue, green. Sometimes I'll do my witches with, and some of my angels with different color hair. You can just be so creative if you want to do a doll all in green. Green hair, green dress, green skin. We can do brown skin, yellow skin, red skin. That's what's so much fun. You can just keep going. And I have a friend that's she's a felter. She does these wonderful creative sculptures in felt, and she is a wonderful supplier of some of these cool, some of this wool that she dyes herself. So I buy a lot of my wool from her, and if you happen to know anyone who raises sheep, you can get wool from them. I buy some at Earth Guild in Asheville sometimes when I'm over there, but just wherever I can find it. I see something that looks like, oh, that would make nice hair, I'll get it. I mean, you can use Spanish moss. Oh, this is llama wool. You can do some wild dolls with that.
And thank you so much. This hour just flew by. So we're actually at 5:02.
Oh my goodness.
For anyone who needs to leave, you're welcome to go ahead and go. But I wanted to let you know that so Martha was joining us and said that they took a class with you here at the folk school, had a wonderful time, and this is a great refresher. So thank you for the inspiration.
Thank you, Martha.
Yeah, and we have people here from about 8 states, so kind of like a folk school class, people from all over. I did share a link to your website and to check out what your Etsy shop and also to buy your books. I encourage everyone to look at those. And I also shared a link to our next Appalachian Traditions. You can register for that. It's also free. And if you'd like to learn about traditional Appalachian baking, we will have Barbara Swell and Nanette Davidson will be actually here on campus in the cooking studio. And so we'll be filming them making some traditional holiday goodies. So please join us for that. If anyone has any follow-up questions, though, I'll go ahead and give you some time to do that. We won't cut it off right now, but thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I know some people might want to see a few more of your finished pieces, so we might go for just a minute or two more if you want to show some of your beautiful dolls. And
sure, I can show you some that I have finished over here. So this one, which is what I was doing there, she'll either be holding a quilt or a weaving or knitting. But here's one of the quilters. So this is batik fabric that I have just sewn together. It's a little quilt top. She has a braid, has a double apron. And I put little hang tags and little stories with my dolls. This one, the quilter, it says her grandmother cut up old clothing and flour sacks to piece her quilts. Today, this quilter uses whatever fabric is on hand to create her art pieces, whether for bedding or for art's sake. Repurposing pieces of fabric is her passion. Her life is in pieces. So that's that one. This one is, I call her Milady. She's got a little parasol and some paper flowers for her hat. And this is a piece of the silk I made a shawl out of. I've started using fabrics and repurposing laces and woven pieces, and sometimes repurposed jewelry. For instance, this is a Frida Kahlo, and she has some beaded work, some old lace, ribbon, a woven shawl. You can just add all kinds of different things. This is a fiddle player. I found these wonderful little musical instruments. So I call this the busker. You know, when you see musicians on the street corner, they're buskers. So she's a fiddle player. And I also have a couple of drawers full of different feathers. I use peacock feathers, guinea feathers, and pheasant feathers. This is preserved western cedar. So this is a winter solstice too, but she's also like a winter solstice angel. And she has multicolored hair, wool for hair. This is a piece of felted material.
Well, thank you, Anne. They're gorgeous. And we got lots of clapping and applause in the chat there for your dolls. We'll end on one final question. How do you affix the hair?
I use a glue gun.
Okay, there you go. Great. Well, thank you. It's been such a pleasure to have you, and we look forward to having you teach here at the folk school again soon.
I can't wait. Thank you all for coming and listening to me go on and on about my love.
Well, thanks everyone, and have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you.
Yep. Take care.
Thanks, Darcy.
Thank you.